And thank you again for coming. This is our Chai and Chat session. The topic today is on crime prevention. One of the interesting topics that people have been wanting to talk about, but it has been on their mind. So today we're going to talk about most of it, mostly comprehensively. Sometimes I asked a question, Nazira, why so many panelists? Because some of our topics are so much complicated, let me put it that way, and we need to address it in all different forms to come to comprehensive solutions. So thank you again. Feel free to get your chai and water and the snacks and refreshment thanks to Swagat Indian Cuisine. I would like to quickly introduce our panelists, and you'll see their profile running on the screen. So in the interest of time, I'm going to quickly introduce their names and their title. So Carl Raut Jr., thank you for being here. You are on the board of directors for Community Metro Atlanta Community Alliance.
Yes.
Yes, awesome, thank you. And you are also the founder of the Teen Dad program. You're going to talk about it more.
Yes.
Right, thank you. And Trey, thank you so much, Trey Holiday. You are the HOA president.
For Hillbrook.
For Hillbrook. And you are also the president of Johns Creek Community Association, and you're going to tell us more about it because it's one of the biggest organization in Georgia. And you might not have seen another community organization that has come together like that. Okay, and it consists of 74 HOAs.
Yes.
That come together. And Nandita Godbole, thank you so much for being here. Probably from all of us tonight, her voice is going to be heard the most because she's the victim of a theft in her house, of her business and herself. And she's going to really tell us what toll that took on her in various forms. So thank you for being here, Hashim. Deputy Sheriff, thank you so much for being here from Bartow County, Hashim Ahmadani, and I really appreciate your time for being here this evening with us. Our District Attorney, how many of you all know what the Office of District Attorney does? Yes? How many of you all know our District Attorney's name if you're living in Fulton County? That's pretty good, yeah. So Paul Harvard. Thank you so much for being here. You are coming driving from all the way from south in such a weather, so really people can understand your trust and your community outreach and your belief in that. Thank you. And Judge McBurney, who was initially on the panel because of last minute scheduling conflicts, could not be here, but I'm so thankful to Judge Jesse Law, who is the first Asian American appointed Fulton County judge. Isn't that great? And thank you for taking the offer in such a short notice. So we really appreciate and are looking forward to listening from your aspect. Miss Ali, I'm going to call her, it doesn't mean I'm not respectful of others, but I have just called her Miss Ali from past 5 years. So I'm just going to call her Miss Ali. Thank you for being here. Is the administrator of the Juvenile Court Justice System, is the Chief Administrator Officer, so she knows everything about juvenile justice. And Jason Palmer, thank you so much. Probably people are going to come and ask you more questions. Jason, you are the integrated systems expert, and you work with Phoenix Security Systems, so you know everything about what works and what doesn't work in security systems.
Yes, ma'am.
So looking forward to hearing from there. And just quick housekeeping. Feel free to get up and get chai, the snacks that you need from the back end in the refreshment room. And also the agenda for today is we're going to go ahead with the panel discussion probably till 5:30 or 5:40, and then we're going to break for 10 minutes. And at that time you can interact with the panelists, but the last part of the session we've dedicated just for Q&A. So the people can ask us questions, and the panelists here will be able to answer you. And you please feel free to, if you're not able to see the panelists or hear, just let us know, or you can change or move or shift your seats if possible. And then we have Tracy. Tracy, why don't you join us? And Tracy, thank you so much for joining us. I know in spite of last minute, Dad is probably released from the hospital, so we appreciate you joining us. Thank you for joining us today and going to educate us on the problem of opioids in North Fulton and the mental health issues that we can address for the justice system. So let me start the question first with Carl Rauch. This is a general question for all of you. I just want the audience to know who you are before we dwell deep into the subject. Carl, what makes you do what you do? And do you ever question yourself? Is this what you've always wanted to do? And you can look at the audience and...
Why do I do what I do? Can you hear me out there?
Yes.
It's personal for me because of the way I grew up. The work that I do today, especially as a program coordinator with a 501c3 nonprofit organization, Community Council of Metropolitan Atlanta, where I am a fatherhood, responsible fatherhood practitioner. I teach responsible boyhood, manhood, and fatherhood. My emphasis on fatherhood is because I grew up in a father-absent home. I had a stepfather, however, my father was not present. And that created an ecosystem for me that was not very good. So the work that I do today, because of the personal impact that it had on my life, I decided that if I feel this way, I know that a lot of other young men feel the very same way that I do. And I got involved in helping to support those who were going through as I had. Therefore, the work that I do is very personal for me, and it involves a lot of different layers. And we'll talk more about that. Hopefully, you'll ask questions that
Yes.
will provoke
Thank you,
more
Carl.
information.
Thank you. Trey?
Thank you. Thanks for being here tonight. My name is Trey Holiday.
And can you hear Trey?
Can you hear me?
No, you can't.
Not fully?
So hold on. We might get another mic. Or we can pass on this one.
Let's try that one.
Yes.
Yeah, that works.
That works better.
Okay, my name is Trey Holiday. Thanks for coming tonight, and thank you, Carl, for that work you do. That's a fantastic mission, and it is so important. My background's actually in aviation, which is pretty far from this, but I would have to say my passion is probably community service, which only started a few years ago for me. I have 3 young children, 10 and under, and it came as an outcropping of having my children and wanting to see them grow up in the right kind of environment, and seeing the community around and wanting to foster a better community. So being involved in JCCA, Johns Creek Community Association, being involved in my HOA board and HOA president, and trying to build a better community. And also, along those lines, coaching youth sports, which is so critical to so many people, that may be some of the only way that they get to learn some of the character lessons and things that are so important that lead to staying away from crime and things later in life. So it's a large part of why I do what I do is just that community service and trying to shape the future, especially with the youth.
Thank you, Trey. And Nandita, I know I forgot to mention earlier, you are an author and an entrepreneur, so you can either talk about your personal or your professional. Why do you do what you do?
This is always my challenge of how far I need to keep the mic. Before I do what I do, before I got to that point, I am the daughter of a retired assistant police commissioner, which brought me to the point in my life where I grew up to threats. I grew up to violence being discussed in the house that didn't have anything to do with us. If any of you were in Bombay and when it was still Bombay, when from the 70s through the late 90s, you would have heard my dad's name. He was in the papers a lot for all the good stuff he did. And we grew up to being extremely, extremely vigilant of who we were, our surroundings, how to be good citizens, how to watch for other people, how to be involved in good ways in your neighborhood. And that had been my upbringing. I have 2 other professions that I was once involved in, but right now, in the last 10 years, I have moved on to being an entrepreneur, a businesswoman, and I'm an author. I have about 5, 6 books and about 3 more in the pipeline. But I'm an independent author, so I do all the work myself. I keep all the money in Georgia. I work with Georgia-based businesses, some of whom are also South Asian businesses. So a lot of my money stays here. And I'm on this panel because I was told about it through a friend, and I was planning on just attending to see what happened. But Nazira reached out and asked if I would be on the panel itself. And I gave it a lot of thought and decided to be here because I think I can speak for share our experience of what happened with the panelists to help us come to a point where we can see how to tackle a problem that has actually plagued the entire country, not just Atlanta, but very specifically Indians and South Asians for more than 10 years. And this is not just happening now. So with that, I'll pass on to somebody who can speak on the law enforcement bit and pass on to you, sir.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Deputy Amadani with the Sheriff's Office, and the question is why I do what I do.
Why do you do what you do?
The answer to that is very simple because it is my passion, and most of you don't know that I was born and raised in Pakistan, and that this became a passion after I migrated from Pakistan. And since then, I've been welcomed in the community, and I've been accepted in the community, even though it was a 9/11 era and all that discrepancies were going on. And I do this because to broadcast that mindset that does not matter what culture you're from, what religion you practice, what race you are, you can achieve what you put your mind to it. And I believe that's the core of what I do, why I do. So, and also my religion, the culture and the religion teaches me to help others. So I couldn't think of any better way to help serve the community just by being law enforcement.
Thank you.
Good
Are you planning on retiring?
No. Why? Are you planning on?
It's just a question. You seem to love your job, and that's why I asked the question.
Wow. Well, my name is Paul Howard Jr. I am the Fulton County District Attorney. And let me just tell you, when I was leaving to come up today, my wife asked me, she said, why are you driving to Johns Creek at 4 o'clock to speak at this program? And I told her it was with Nazira, and she said, I don't understand why you're going. I said, because I am really big in the Indian community, and so I was disappointed when there's only one person who even recognized my name. So let me just introduce myself. I'm the Fulton County District Attorney, and what we do is we prosecute felony cases in our county. Generally, we charge about 10,000 defendants a year, and those cases range all the way from murders and homicides down to theft cases. Our office is about 238 people. 108 of those are lawyers that prosecute the cases before the 20 judges in our Fulton County system. I have always wanted to be a prosecutor, at least since the time that I was about 13 or 14. I endured a very humiliating experience the first time that I visited a courtroom. A class of about 5 or 6 other students and myself visited a courtroom in the county where I grew up in Burke County, Georgia. And at the courtroom that day, they were trying an African-American man, and he was charged with aggravated assault. And he was charged with shooting at or pointing a gun at the white person whose place or whose farm that he lived on. Well, as it turns out, the gun was actually pointed by the person who was the victim. But while the case went on, I was really surprised that they allowed the prosecutor to refer to the defendant by using the N-word. And I did not know that they allowed people to say that in court. I did not know that the judge would refer to the defendant by using the N-word. But what was really shocking to me is that the defendant's own lawyer referred to him by using the N-word. And so I was only 13 or 14 at the time, but I said to myself that I wanted to work in our court system. I wanted to be a prosecutor so that no one else would have to endure that kind of humiliation. And so that's what I've always been. I've never looked back, but let me tell you, at the end of the month sometimes when my wife looks at my bank account, she looks back, but I don't.
Thank you. Thank you, DA, and we appreciate all that you do for the community. Thank you. Judge.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessie Lal, and I'm a magistrate judge with Fulton County. Why I do what I do, I was a litigator for quite a few years, and I used to occasionally represent individuals in criminal court as well as in juvenile court. And one thing that struck me, especially with my clientele being of South Asian descent, was that a lot of people on the bench, judges, didn't quite understand some of the cultural traits and cultural issues that we Indians or we Koreans or Chinese, people from the South Asian regions, there are certain cultural issues, the way we treat our kids, the way we view our kids, the way we perceive individuals who may be charged with a crime when it really isn't a crime. And it really shocked me that there was this big missing gap in some kind of cultural sensitivity or cultural competence on the bench. When I was offered an opportunity to become a part-time judge, I realized that I could help provide some information to close that void. And eventually, I became the first Indian female to be appointed in the state of Georgia to become a full-time judge, a position that I take very, very seriously. I believe that I try to bring some kind of information, education to litigants, whether they are in a civil case or in a criminal case. I hope us as Indians or folks from Pakistan or anywhere from any Asian country are not surprised that there are defendants who are Indians and Pakistanis and Chinese, and they do get charged with criminal offenses. And we have to also approach these cases with a lot of what I consider cultural competence. I feel that I do provide a service that I'm very proud of, and I hope to continue with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Ms. Ali.
Yes. Good evening, I think it is now. My name is Tayo Ali, and I am the Chief Administrative Officer for Fulton County Juvenile Court, where we're taking up to 6,000 to 7,000 cases a year. And these are children, they can range from 0 to 17 or 18, depending on whether it's delinquency or dependency. Now, I started my career as a defense attorney in the public defender's office, and I did that for about 16, 17 years. And it was the very last case that I tried that got me out of there, because it was a murder case, and that was his second time, and twice we won the cases. But for me, when I got home that evening, I asked myself, what did I give to him? He still didn't have any education. He still didn't have any way to make a living. And there was a good chance that he was going to come back. Because see, everything that you see today in the adult world, in juvenile court, is a manifestation of something that's very big. And that something very big is because a lot of the people who are in the criminal justice system do not have education. They are coming from a long line of families who have been put through poverty or other forms of oppression, or some things that they're doing to themselves today. But it doesn't matter where it started from. The question is, what are we going to do to reverse that pipeline? And so hopefully today is going to be the beginning of a good conversation. We do not get a lot of clients from this side of town. We usually actually get all our clients from South Fulton. So I'm happy to be here to understand the issues that, the criminal issues that are also here on this side of town. I'm very grateful that you have invited me, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ali. Jason.
Oh,
Check. So my name is Jason Palmer. I work with a local integrated security system. There we go. My name is Jason, and I work with one of the local security system providers. And I do what I do because I like to help people understand home technology, understand integrating systems into their home from a lot of standpoints, but definitely for home security, how to secure their family and how to protect them and their belongings. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy, the question was, why do you do what you do? And have you ever questioned yourself?
That's a great question. I think why we do what we do is because I feel like each of us has a calling, and I think sometimes it takes a while to figure out really what we want to do. But I think my dad encouraging me to pursue my graduate degree in public health really opened up the pathways to a lot of different directions for me. And my public health master's degree is what connected Nazira and I. And so, long story short, as a result of connections through Nazira and our shared degree, we were able to really connect on a lot of levels, and she was able to introduce me to the whole idea of mental health and the need for additional resources. And one of the programs that she created is a North Fulton County Mental Health Collaborative, of which I am proudly a member of. In fact, since the very beginning, this is a brainchild of Nazira, and I was at the very, very first meeting, I would say approximately 6 years ago. And since then, she also appointed me or nominated me to be on the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities Advisory Task Force, which basically is all of us here who are able to express our opinion on what is needed as far as mental health and such. I was able to, I guess, convince them of my passion and my, I guess, interest in helping us, I guess, combat not only the mental health stigma and the opioid epidemic that President Trump is so enforcing right now, but I was able to get appointed to the Leadership Council, which allows me voting power. And last but not least, I was discovered there, as I would put it, and I was able to join now the statewide opioid task force under the direction of State Attorney General Chris Carr. And I also was able to actually speak last month about something that was brought up very important just now in front of not only Chris Carr, but also Steve Marshall, which is also the State Attorney General for the state of Alabama, who is joining forces with Georgia in helping combat this opioid epidemic. But the reason I was called to speak was dovetailing back to a point made earlier, is we may develop all kinds of materials, right? But if we have a variety of different population subgroups who are speaking all different languages, if you're releasing them from rehab and they don't understand what the next steps are because they don't have a person who is culturally competent or sensitive or is educated or is really willing to help that person, all of what you've done has really maybe not been optimized. So I just want to say that my passion to ask is why I do what I do is I want to narrow the gaps. Ethnic, racial health disparities. I want us to create resources, and I want us to increase dialogue in different languages. So that's what my goal is to just see if we can narrow the gaps a little bit.
Thank you so much. So this question is for the audience, right? Because the topic today is similar to these words that we're going to use. Do you all know the difference between theft, larceny, burglary, and robbery? How many of you all know that there is differences between these words? Most of you all know. So I'm going to define this, and we're going to move on to the questions for the panelists, but just so that you are clear, it's if an act involves taking a property in the immediate presence of another person, and a crime is classified as this if it is upon the ground of bench without force or fear. Is it theft, burglary, robbery? Theft. So theft involves no fear, right? So it's laid upon the ground or bench without force. So it's without force or fear is theft. So someone's taking a thing away from you without force or fear. That's theft. Larceny is like chain snatching, right? So it has to be on your body. a purse snatching. So that's larceny. Robbery is a violent crime because it involves fear or force. So now you know the difference between robbery and theft. When you're not been, nobody has been, the robber has not been violent on you, then it's probably a theft. But if he's been violent and created fear or force, it's robbery. Burglary is the same thing, but it has to happen in closed four walls. It has to be either in your car or your home. So that's when you call it burglary. See, I didn't know all this until I started preparing. So now you all know when when the police or the marshal talks about is it a theft or a burglary, right? Because I think the law statute also is different when you charge based on these.
We look at the facts and we try to decide. Actually, Mr. Howard could defer to that
If you
because
can
he
give
has,
the mic. Yes.
he has a team of lawyers who draft these all the time, depending on the facts presented to his lawyers. And typically, if you have a cell phone, sir, the one with the orange jacket, and I looked at the cell phone, I say, "Oh, that's so pretty," and I pick it up and I walk away, that's theft because you don't really fear me. But if I hold a gun to you and I say, "I want that phone, give it up," that is robbery. And that would be armed robbery. And what was the other one? Burglary.
Burglary.
All right. So you have a house and you leave a window open, and I crawl in and I see your cell phone there, and I've entered a dwelling with the intent to commit a felony or theft therein. So I got your cell phone from your desk and then I crawl out the window, that's burglary. Mr. Howard, please correct me. I'm sure you will.
Yeah, well, I think you're right, and the crime that we usually get a lot of confusion about is a phrase that we use in the South a lot. When somebody breaks in your house, people will say, "Man, they robbed my house," or "They robbed me," but that's not actually a robbery. It is a burglary, and the robbery, as Nazir said, is taking something from the person. When you are fear or in fear of someone else. But generally, these common law rules apply to a place, whether it's in your pocket or in the house, and whether or not you are conscious that someone is committing the crime against you. All right?
Yes.
Is that confusing enough?
Great. So the question I have, I want to start with, sort of include all of us and show how the system works. So when I hear our residents sometimes come to me, because I worked in Fulton County for 7 years, so I sort of know how the system works. So when someone comes and tells me, "Hey, the police is not responding, I've gone to them thrice, they're just saying go do this, do that, nobody's responding," I feel sad in a sense that I wish they would be more educated, because a theft is not just a theft. It's not just the police's solution. The whole system gets involved. And I wanted to sort of play it out right here. So suppose there's a juvenile who's committed a robbery, and then immediately, just in case, just thinking out, Nandita is impacted, right? She calls the police or the sheriff's office. What happened? Let's play it out. What happens next? You get the call or you get the complaint is written, and she has given you what has happened. Then what happens?
Well, what happens is once you call 911, it gets to dispatch, and the dispatch dispatches a certain officer, a certain deputy to on that call. And when we go on scene, we take a report and we document whatever we are advised or told by the victim that such and such things have been taken, such and such thing happened. So we do the report due to that we can't prove who did it, what happened exactly, play by play, and we forward that report to our CID unit, which is our criminal investigation unit, and then they are the ones who approach the victim. Then they get involved and they investigate. They may ask the same questions that I asked her on the call to get more clarification. And once they begin the investigation, excuse me, and then they're starting getting tips lined, and then once they figure out, once they say, "Oh no, this is the person who committed that crime," then they if it's a juvenile, then there's a different protocol than an adult. If it's a juvenile that has committed the crime, then we have to contact DJJ, which is Department of Juvenile Justice, and then they make a decision on whether we transport them or whether we turn them to their parents.
Sure.
And we do the report, and they get reports transferred.
Okay, suppose it's in a good case that we know who the victim, who the criminal is, yes. And then it goes to your office?
Well,
Does it come to the juvenile justice? When does the DA's office and when does I'm trying to make the system, show them how the system works.
Okay, so when he said the Department of Juvenile Justice, he can come to us in juvenile court to determine whether the child should be detained that evening.
And you can look at them.
Oh, sorry. Whether the child should be detained or not. If the child is detained, it's only for 48 hours. When the child comes to court, and then that's when the district attorney comes in and the child gets a defense attorney. The district attorney comes in to determine whether there's probable cause for the case to go forward or not go forward, and that's then the will start at that point. But where the community really gets involved is when the child is picked up. Our court has to determine whether this child should go back home that evening or whether that child should be detained. And there are so many factors that will go into that for us to determine that.
Sure. And if it's an adult, it doesn't come to your court.
Not at all. Not at all.
It goes to DA. Can
Mr.
you?
Howard.
Yeah.
Right. So now this becomes really confusing about our system, because how you proceed is based on many occasions where the crime takes place. For instance, if the crime takes place in a municipality like Johns Creek, then you have to call the police department because there is a police chief. But suppose the crime took place in Bartow County, where there wasn't a municipality, then you've got to call the sheriff's department, because the sheriff in those counties is the first responder. So then you have to decide whether or not the crime is a misdemeanor, because if it is a misdemeanor, and that's a crime that you could receive 12 months or less, then if the police or the sheriff might be kind of slow in the investigation, then you would call the Solicitor General, because the Solicitor General handles the misdemeanors. But if it is a felony that you are not satisfied with the way that it is moving along, then you would call the district attorney to then ask what has happened to my charge.
So you would be representing the victim.
That's
the
correct.
District Attorney's office always represents the victim. So you are our attorney.
That's correct.
Attorney.
So you don't
He is
have to,
attorney.
that's correct. You don't have to hire a lawyer. If it is a felony crime, then you would be represented by the district attorney. Now, one of the kinds of cases where it doesn't make any difference if it's a felony or a misdemeanor, well, suppose it was a case that involved some misconduct of a law enforcement officer, then you would always then seek the district attorney rather than to speak to the Solicitor General. But we represent the victims, the district attorney's office, so which means you would not have to hire your own lawyer to advocate for you, but you should be able to call the district attorney.
Okay. And then, so now, either in juvenile court or in your court, the state or the superior or the magistrate court, the case comes forward.
Right.
Then what happens?
So the police have investigated, they've identified the defendant, and before it even gets to Mr. Howard's office or the Solicitor General, I would get a call or I'd have the police officer come to me. And under oath, they will tell me what are the alleged facts of the case, and I would have to make a decision as to whether to issue an arrest warrant. Once an arrest warrant is issued, then the individual is arrested, brought to the Fulton County Jail, if the crime occurred in Fulton County. Is brought to Fulton County, at which point then Mr. Howard's attorneys would be in a courtroom with me, as well as defense counsel. We will then decide whether the case would be sent to the next stage, what we call a preliminary hearing. The individual will be charged with a crime. They may or may not get a bond. A bond is a monetary issue. If they can't afford it, they cannot secure their release. They remain in the Fulton County Jail pending the indictment, a formal case that would be drafted by Mr. Howard's office. And from that point onwards, then it gets assigned to a Superior Court judge, and hence begins the trial process. And this is a very accelerated, short version of what could possibly happen. Of course, in between, there's going to be many phases where Mr. Howard's office, especially his victim advocate office, would be in frequent consult with the victims of the case to let them know and what stage of the case is, and when it will go to trial, and when will the victims need to appear to present that case to a jury and help Mr. Howard represent the state of Georgia in prosecuting the crime.
Okay, so my question is, when does Trey and Carl and Jason and Tracy's organization come forward? When is because I can see so many missing links can happen in between during this process of the system. Trey, you represent the community organizations, you know what's happening, you are the president of the HOA. When do you think you should come in and sort of, even if the victim is not, if the criminal is not caught, is there something your organization could do to help with this investigation? Is that appreciated by the DA's office or the sheriffs of the police department, that the community is coming forward to help you all find the criminal? If you can give it to Trey.
Thanks for the question. So there's a couple of different places. I think it starts a lot earlier, probably in where Carl starts, but in my position in president of an HOA, it's more preventative, and you're fostering community awareness and community cohesiveness. You know your neighbors. When something happens in a neighborhood like that, maybe you have, or maybe you don't have in your neighborhood, we have a Facebook page that one of the residents runs, and so everybody becomes aware fairly quickly when something happens. And I remember last year there was a situation where there was an individual who was entering automobiles, stealing stuff at night, and there wasn't a whole lot the police could do at that point, and they ended up putting a camera inside, and they had a notification on the gentleman's phone. He woke up in the middle of the night with a notification, called the police, and they caught the person. So a lot of it is the residents, I'd say, kind of advocating for themselves in that case, and being aware, looking out for each other, I would say would probably be the kind of role somebody would take in an HOA. And knowing your neighbors, Jason and I were talking before this, and he was talking about how common it is. I think I'm not going to hopefully steal your thunder, but how common it is when somebody moves into a new home that they get burgled fairly soon after when they're not there. And a lot of this might stem from not knowing your neighbors. And the thing that I would encourage folks to go out, especially if you move into a new neighborhood, go out and meet your neighbors. A lot of times people tend to stay with the friends they have, and if you're in a neighborhood and you don't know everybody, that's your first line, one of your first lines of defense, I think, is to have neighbors that you know. The first thing whenever I move into a neighborhood, my wife and I, we actually, and the kids, and it sounds kind of silly in some ways, and maybe a little bit, Southern cliche, but we actually go to all of the neighbors around there. We knock on their doors. Hi, my name is Trey. I'm your new neighbor. What's your name? Who are the kids? Let's exchange phone numbers. And you set that up and you start looking out for each other. And in addition to that, the willingness for a lot of times for people to actually be able to be willing to call law enforcement. I see very often we get posts on Facebook, oh, I saw this thing and this, something happened and there was this person and how awful this was, or on Nextdoor. But nobody ever called the police. Everybody maybe doesn't want to be that person that's an over-alarmist. But that's their job, is to go out there and see what's going on. And if it's something that's suspicious, and gosh, I don't want my neighbor to have their friend over and it looks really odd, and then I'm embarrassed because I called the cops on it, and then it's a big fiasco and it looks terrible. But part of that is, if you know your neighbors, you can always call them, hey, I saw this truck outside your house I'm not used to seeing, or it's the middle of the day. Were you expecting somebody? And so you can talk to the neighbor. But a lot of times at night, we hear these things happen, and nobody called the police the whole time. Oh, and you hear this, oh, I heard the strange noise. We heard this loud bang, but we didn't think anything of it. So I think the willingness to call the police, in my position, it's trying to foster that within the community, trying to foster the relationships between the community members.
Sure. Trey, thank you. Nandita, before I give it to Carl, Nandita, I have a question for you. I see you were a little bit frustrated, so we want to hear from you on what are some things, because it happened to you. Here we are giving advice, which is rightfully so, but tell us what has frustrated you, and then we'll go to Carl and Jason and Tracy on mental health issues.
Thank you for catching that. And what I was shaking my head at is the process of what happened to us. We have lived in our neighborhood for 12 years. 12. We know the people who live around us. We watch over each other's houses. We have each other's phone numbers. We text if we see odd things. I'm the person who calls the police at night if I see a strange person in a parking lot that's right next to our house. Our house is extremely exposed, where nobody can be in, like people tell me from the neighborhood when they see what's growing in my backyard and come over and say, hey, Nandita, those flowers are really pretty. And I will take a bunch over to their house if I have extra, or if that's the only one, then hey, you're welcome to it. When I go away to India for whatever length of time, whenever I do, they come over and water our garden. They come over and pick our vegetables and take whatever they want, and we have that open relationship with them. But the theft happened at 3:15 in the afternoon, when everybody was either home, walking in and out of their homes, coming back home from whatever day job they had, or from an early shift or afternoon shift, picking up kids at the bus stop, which is down the street, not even a block. It is at the end of our lot. That's where the school bus stop is. And nobody saw it. My backyard and my back door is visible as clear as day to anyone walking their dog. And no one saw people come into our house. The length of time that they stayed, I am surprised that in the 20 minutes that they would have been in our house, nobody caught anything amiss. We walked into our burgled house about 3 hours later, and that's when we informed the neighbor saying, hey, did you know that my house just got broken in? So it's one thing, and coming from where I am, from my perspective, I want to share that it's great to know your neighbors. It's great to have that. That is necessary. Your neighborhood watches are necessary. Call people if you see something suspicious, but you don't really know what point in time you are going to be the victim. And I don't want to take away more time, but if you stop and talk to me later on, I can keep you here for hours. I don't want to do that, and I don't want to scare people. But I definitely want to share that there are two sides to it. There is the law side of what happens after it goes to the police, but there is the before and during that is very, very, very different than once it happens to your house. It's like trying to gather a big spill and trying to gather your life back together. And whatever every agency does, that is doing their job. But it's after it has already happened.
Yes, DA, go ahead, and then I want you to just tell that specific what the police told you when you made the report. Go ahead, DA.
Well, I do want to say that in my estimation, there is no crime that is worse than burglary. It's a horrible crime. we have emphasized it in our office for years. So I guess it's been now about 5 or 6 years ago, we actually brought to our office about 4 or 5 burglary defendants. And we wanted to find out from them, how did they make a decision as to whose house they were going to break into? And this is what they told us. They said that they went to neighborhoods that they noticed that the folks in the neighborhood would not immediately report them. That's what they said. So what they said is that sometimes they would actually park a car in the neighborhood. It would be a stolen car, but nobody in the neighborhood reported it to the police. So what that meant to them is that is a neighborhood that was ripe for them to burglarize. And so it is really important that if you see something that is just remotely suspicious to you, you have to start calling. But you know, you can take another step even before that happens, because this is what the burglar said. In your neighborhoods, you can call the police already. You can start meeting with them. And you can tell them, hey, you know, we are really concerned about the fact that somebody might break into our homes, and we want you to know that we're going to cooperate. We want you to drive through. We want you to check. And in fact, if you're not driving through, we're going to call the police chief, because we want you to watch our neighborhoods. But let me tell you one of the unfortunate things about the defendants that we brought in. This is what they told us. And I'm sure you guys have probably heard this. In some of the neighborhoods, they will go back on 2 or 3 occasions after the initial burglary. And this is what the burglar said. They said that until the neighbors made a correction, that they would just continue to go back to the same location, and they said that they would burglarize the same people. And so you have to understand that a lot of what goes on is going to depend on you. And I'm going to tell you one other thing. Don't tell anybody I told you this, but I'm going to tell you this. Oh, it's been recorded, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So, you know, in our office, we receive burglary cases, but on about 90% of those cases, guess who is responsible, who's mainly responsible for apprehending those defendants? It's the victims. It's the victims who are calling in the license plates. It's the victims who are chasing them down, and they are calling the police to tell them. So it is the victims and people in the community that really play an important part in keeping your own neighborhood safe. But that's our secret, okay?
Yes.
We're not going to tell anybody that.
Sure.
All right.
So DA, I know you said the police has to do their rounds, but do we have enough resources in the police department to do that for all the 200 HOAs or the subdivisions that we have here?
Yes. Yeah. Let me just tell you, now this is the way that I look at it, is our entire governmental system is set up for this main purpose. Do you know what that purpose is? It's to keep us safe. That's what the government is set up for. You know, so we wouldn't have vigilantes and people doing it themselves. We've got a system that's set up to keep citizens safe. So my belief is that if you don't have the resources, then you've got to redistribute the current resources, because the first thing that you've got to do is you've got to keep me what?
Safe.
You got to keep me safe. Because if you don't keep me safe in Fulton County, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to move to Bartow County, because people want to be safe. And I just don't think that it's appropriate. You know, many times people say, well, you know, we just don't have enough people to watch your neighborhood. Well, then you probably need to figure out a way to realign yourselves, because that's what you're supposed to do for us, is to keep us safe.
Yes. So Nandita, just very quickly, in a brief few seconds, what did the police tell you as soon as you reported it about the jewelry? And then I have a question for Carl.
Right as we are recording this statement with the two detectives who came in, or the two, I don't know their ranks. Let's just leave it at that. I'm too dazed at that point to process anything, and I am talking to them about what we believe is stolen, because that's your split second. You have to recap. The one statement that stuck out to me from the female officer who was there at the scene. She asked me very politely, please don't take this the wrong way, but are you by any chance, are you Indian? And I said, yes, why? Well, that means that you were targeted. That statement I cannot erase from my brain. And I have a lot more to share about what happens with the resources that our DA is telling us about, how they get distributed, whatever our role as the victim. But it is a frustrating process to grab your brain around the idea that you are targeted for who you are, for your lifestyle. Our house has nothing on its doors that tells you that we are from India. We have no markings. I dress like this when I'm going out on the street on most days. When you see my business professional pictures, those are because that's my work. So any of these other ideas about what these criminals are thinking about when they're thinking about hitting your house didn't apply to us at all. We actually have 2 policemen who live in our neighborhood, and the police cars are going through our neighborhood just because they're leaving home or they're returning home. We've had a neighborhood watch group in place for a while, but again, everybody's busy. We do what we can. So sometimes it's not enough. And the question is then, when is it going to be enough for us to get to that point?
Sure,
So
Carl, thank you. Carl, thank you for your patience.
Let me just say real quick, I'm so sorry that you've gone through this, and the violation and trauma that you must feel after it is unconscionable. And I'm very sorry that you've had to endure this. I hope something really good comes out of it, though.
She has more to say, and you'll be surprised, Trey. So, Carl, tell us, here we are, we have assumed, here's the person who's a criminal. Let's say he's a juvenile. What perspective do you bring from that aspect? Because here we are all saying it's a criminal, he came and violated my rights, he came into my home, burglarized, but let's hope this criminal is a 16 or 15-year-old and there are 2 or 3 friends who've been doing this. What is it that you can tell us about them?
What we invoke is the process of redemption. Stuff happens. People do things that they regret. People are sometimes underdeveloped to a point where they feel that's the only way that they can survive. Anyway, I just want to mention something. Mr. Charania, I spoke with him earlier, and he asked me, he said, I told him, I said, I do a lot of prison ministry, and I go to visit the juvenile detention centers, and I deliver programs and interventions to help them to grow and do better. And he said to me, he asked me, he said, how many Indian children do you see locked up there? And I said, probably less than 1%. And you know what he said to me? He said, because we take care of our children. Now this is where the Community Council of Metropolitan Atlanta comes into play. We have come to a place where we recognize who's locked up in our institutions. Most of these, and I'm speaking more about men, young men, because I have been one and I'm still a man. And I know that 90% of those incarcerated in our jails and prisons are men. Of course, we got a 300% jump in female incarceration today, but what I'm saying is this. Those who are locked up come from father-absent homes. Those who are locked up have less than an ideal education level. Usually 8th grade, I think. D.A. Howard can probably quote me on that. But low education, not a positive male role figure in the house. And then when you look at the impact of fatherlessness or having an absent father on the child, greater chances of dropping out, committing suicide, having sex. This is just by not having a father present in the home or that father influence. We seek to bring interventions that will help a young person who has gotten caught up in the web of the criminal justice system. When we find out that, hey, this person really doesn't have an education level that they need, and we try to help galvanize community resources to make that happen. We have worked with Fulton County Juvenile Court. We have worked with the Fulton County DA's office. As a matter of fact, D.A. Howard has spoken at one of our graduations with Fulton County Teen Dads Program. This is an intervention where we teach young fathers, 13 to 19 years old, who have a child or a child on the way. We teach them responsible manhood and fatherhood. Without this intervention, many of them would be out surviving, breaking into your homes, selling drugs, doing whatever they need to do by any means necessary. But we galvanize the community to get the resources that are needed to help this young man find gainful employment, to help him to get his education up to par, and to whatever needs that they have that will keep them, that we can help to meet, that will keep them from violating or offending the community. This is the way we do business.
Sure.
I don't want to take much time, but I brought a young man with me, Mr. Logie Ruffin, who is a living demonstration of what is happening and what can happen when you galvanize community resources like himself to go into the system and to reach out to those who have transgressed and offended the community and bring them back through teaching and redemptive processes.
Thank
and
you
I
so much.
just wanted to share that.
Definitely, and we would definitely like to hear from you. I'll see when that can happen. Yes.
I would
Jason,
very much like to say, and Judge Law, you can, and Ms. Ali, I heard you say something that I've heard for many years, that someone targeted someone because they were Indian. Let me tell you, most of the folks who get burglarized in Fulton County are African American. They're not Indian. Is that what you see?
Yes, a large population of victims of burglary are of African American ethnicity.
So I don't know who that policeman was, but I would apologize that they said that to you, to give you the impression, and I've heard people on television make these crazy statements. You know, Indian people have got jewelry in their homes and they keep large amounts of cash laying around, and so they get targeted. That's just not true. Guys, if you met the people that were burglarizing your homes, they're not involved in a lot of research to find out your heritage. They are simply trying to make some money so that they can survive. And that's what this gentleman is talking about. So I want to apologize if that is what people have felt, that they were being targeted. Because if there's any group that should be complaining about being targeted, it would be African American single working mothers, who really make up the largest number of burglary victims in our community. A couple of years ago, and something that we are still trying to recover from, we had an African American woman who was a supervisor at Target, and she was home watching a football game, and a group of young men broke into her house, and she was killed in her own closet. She was not Indian, as most of our victims are not, and And I hope that maybe today, by having this forum, that we can start to eliminate some of the crazy myths that people develop, because it almost makes it appear that they're blaming you for being Indian. So I guess it's okay because that's who gets targeted. That's not true. And we ought to end that today. And I'm sorry that somebody said that to you.
Sir, let me say something. It may be true in your Fulton County, but not in Gwinnett County. There are lots of Indian burglaries in Indian homes. When the people come from the convenience store, they have money with them and they have been attacked.
Right.
Sure.
Whereas in Gwinnett County, a lot of Indians have been burglarized.
So,
It may not be in Fulton County.
yes,
But,
and then
but
we
what you have to
move on.
understand is the reason that they are burglarizing you is not because you're Indian, it's because you got what? Cash. So if you were in another county where the population was mainly white, if they had money, they would still burglarize that person. So I want you to understand, and we've got a very diverse county here in Fulton County, and they are breaking into people's homes in order to get some property to sell so that they can make money. I wish that most people had a chance to meet most of these defendants, because once you met them, you'd be really satisfied that they weren't really targeting any one nationality, but what they were really looking for was something to sell. All right?
Yes. Okay. So we will have a Q&A session where we can clear most of the doubts that the audience has. So Jason, finally, I'm turning this right side. So we're still talking about the system, right? We've not completed the system yet. So Nandita's home got burglarized, and she had a security system. So do you think it would not have been burglarized had she had it on, or what went wrong?
Well, first of all, there's not a security system out there that's going to keep someone from getting in your home if they want to get in. 9 times out of 10, what we see.
Can you hear Jason?
Can you hear me?
Okay.
9 times out of 10, what we see from our view is that it's a smash and grab sort of situation. The perpetrator that's coming into your home doesn't want a confrontation. That's the last thing they want. They want to get in, they want to get out, they don't want to be seen. And I will say that, we have seen a rise in targeting, the Indian culture. But I don't necessarily think that it's because of your nationality or your race. It's because of what these people know about you as an individual, probably. And so what I try to do is come into your home and help you understand where I believe the most vulnerable areas of your home are. All right, and we try to protect that the best we can. And again, along with community awareness and folks that are able to look out for your home, it's not going to seclude you from being victimized by any stretch, but it's just another line of defense. And certainly when you can integrate video, security, people think about security systems and they kind of lose sight of some of the things that are actually, that work tactically. Extremely loud, high-pitched sirens inside a home or even outside a home in an attic. When you break into a home and the siren is so loud, it hurts your ears and it makes it hard to think. And you know that it's blasting out into the neighborhood and things like that. It will make somebody think about staying in there for very long. So that's one thing that we try to talk about when consulting with people. Also, perimeter security. So many people forget about securing the perimeter of their home. They want to secure their house, or they want to look at security inside their home with like motion sensors and things like that. But they're already in your house by the time the alarm goes off. These people usually are going to be in and out in 4 to 6 minutes, is usually what we see. when we do have, I mean, I've seen cases like yours where people have pulled up in moving vans and literally moved furniture out of someone's home and driven off in a moving van. A guy comes home a week later from his family vacation and walks in the door and realizes all of his furniture's gone. You know, but security systems, community awareness, knowing your neighbors, all those things are lines of defense that you can put between you and someone that's potentially going to break into your home. And again, I'll just echo, you know, surveillance is a, I won't say it's going to prosecute whoever broke in your home, because 9 times out of 10, we know that even if they're caught on camera, being able to prosecute that person with that video, it's not always tangible, but it certainly is a deterrent for those people that are trying to break into your home, because they don't want to get caught. You know, that's the last thing they want to do. So anyway, that's really, you know, what I have to say and how we are. The other thing is, once we have a break-in and we know that, at least for the company that I work with, which is Phoenix Systems, if we know that an alarm system was on and there was a break-in, we actually go and investigate it ourselves. So as an installer, what we do, we would send our installer out, and I'm an ex-installer, and I've been in situations where I've had customers burglarized, and we go because we want to find out if it's a fault of ours, right? We want to find out if it's something that went wrong with the system, if there was a failure somewhere. You know, and we do help identify for the victim and for the police department. Sometimes we help identify exactly where the break-in took place, because sometimes that perpetrator may have come in and left without ever breaking glass, without ever kicking a door in. You know, people leave their windows open all the time. People forget to lock the back door. People leave their garage door open. We've seen people, you know, been held up at gunpoint. You leave your garage door open. Someone, you know, has been following you or knows who you are. They'll come in your garage. You never lock that garage door, or they'll steal the key fob. You know, this is kind of old school, but back when they had the, you know, the push button garage door openers that we all put in our car. Now all our cars are programmable for that, but they'll steal the car garage door opener off your visor, and they'll watch your house. You'll leave. Now they've got your car garage door opener. You don't realize it till you get back home that it's gone, you know, but your home's been broken into. So
Jason.
If you don't mind, just a brief thing. I had Johns Creek Police Department actually come over to my house and tell me whether, because when you're a burglary victim, the first thing you go, why me? Out of all these homes, why me? And we never really get educated on what is it about our home or our business that would make us have a high likelihood to be a victim of a burglary. Maybe we should get educated. If you buy a couple of brand new TVs, you might not want to leave the boxes at the end of the driveway, letting everyone know that there are a couple of real cool plasma TVs in my home. Big glass windows that are open to the public and so forth, whether your doors are secure, you know, things like that. You may live in a gated community, but that doesn't necessarily mean that is a deterrent. There are a variety of factors that can affect different individuals. I see burglary cases every week, and there are different factors that can attract a particular situation where you become a victim of burglary. But unfortunately, just because you're a particular race, that in and of itself is not a reason why you become a victim of burglary.
Great. So, Tracy, I would like you to answer the question. So, Jason, you just made me feel bad because I think I'm still old school. I still have the push button on my car for the garage. Oh, I need to update? Upgrade? Okay. So, it's fine.
Same here.
Tracy, here you are, and you've attended a 2-day training on opioid task force. Tell me what are some things or the training materials that taught you on what kids or adults can go through to even get these drugs, because they need these drugs, either the opioid or the illicit drugs, they need it. So talking about mental health issues, what are some of the things that you would like to tell the audience that could be surprising, why they do some of the things we've been talking about?
Yeah, so kind of pulling together several comments that everyone has made, I think this is not about, like you said, Indian or what have you, or any socioeconomic status target, especially when you look at the person and why they're actually stealing. And unfortunately, there's a lot of mental health issues, I think, that we don't really address like we should. We talk about physical health, anatomy, physiology, but we don't talk about neurology, and we don't talk about mental health and talk about why are we doing what we're doing, what are the triggers, what are the catalysts, and what is prompting us to steal. So when you have a person who is addicted to some type of a substance or chemical, they associate that high with as this DBHDD conference pointed out, the love of a mother even. So when the person is actually getting that opioid or that product, that sensation that they're feeling is similar to that of being held by their mother's arms. And so when we realize that, oh my God, we've created this madness, we've created this product, these products, these synthetics, these street drugs that are actually hurting all of us. So I want you to all know, I know and I agree with you, I really felt empathetic to someone coming into your home. I really do, and I appreciate you acknowledging that. But there's a third side to that. And I know that's hard to see, but when you're an addict, you don't see that. You need to go in there and you need to get that high, you need to get that fix. And you're gonna go in and you're gonna go where the money's at. You're not going to go where the last name is Patel. Okay, so I just want everyone to know that we have to look at what is going on. People are not just stealing gold, but they're stealing drugs out of your pharmaceutical, your medicine cabinets. That's the part that right now we need to talk about as far as my role. Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities Advisory Task Force is a volunteer group. Everything that I cited earlier was all volunteerism. I'm not getting paid for any of this. But again, my heart is big and I want to help us. These people who are coming in and stealing, a lot of them, they can't help it. But what we have to do is, like you said, leave less marks. We need to also help these people because they're at a level right now that they will go in. Okay, for example, Tony Hoffman, I don't know if there's any former BMX pro fans out here, but he's a gentleman. He was our breakout. He was our main speaker at this state-led training. And there's a sentence in here that I want to read that really kind of resonates with me today. It says that Tony had violated his probation and knows the depths of addiction and understands the despair addicts go through even after a 10-year program. So what I'm saying to you is that I know stuff happens. You mentioned stuff happens. Unfortunately, it happened to you. Like you say, why me? Why my home? They don't care. It's a building. It has stuff in it to sell. So we need to realize that a lot of what's happening is not targeted. It's helplessness. That's why President Trump has declared this as an epidemic. This is a crisis. We are creating our own monsters. The product is coming through the streets, right? Predominantly in the lower socioeconomic status subgroups. And it's coming through the other groups through the pharmaceutical reps. So what's happening is that it's like just like a guerrilla marketing where everybody's coming in from all different directions. And it's causing people to act in a desperate way. Desperate times lead to desperate measures. And unfortunately, this does lead to thefts of medicine cabinets. One warning I just want to say before I turn over the mic. If you have people coming to your home and they happen to, whether it's an open house or you're renting the home or they're just coming through, make sure you hide your medicine cabinets because they go into open homes. They go into open houses. They go into your medicine cabinets. A grandchild will go into their grandparents' medicine cabinet, deprive them of their medicines because they have an addiction. Now, they stole from their own family in their own home. I don't know whether you call it felony or burglary or what all those terminologies are, but the point is that there is an addiction problem here. So what can DBHDD do? We want to educate. One of the gentlemen that spoke is educating the police officers on how to recognize mental health disorders or behaviors, because sometimes they're very quick to lock somebody up. They don't realize that that person may be on meds. Why don't you ask them, what meds are you on? Do you have family history? No one's talking about that. And as I've been involved with all of this for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years, I am amazed at the lack of communication. We have silos, you all. We're not talking to each other. Everyone's going into work. They're going into work 8 to 5. They're doing their little stuff. They come home. But 3 people just died, I think, last week. One drug, some street drug, knocked out 3 people in one little neighborhood. But guess what? I didn't hear about it till 2 weeks later. Why is there not an Amber Alert type of program? Why don't we say, hey, you all, in zip code 30022, there were 3 people that just took something off the streets and they're knocked out? Why do we have to hear about it 2 weeks later? Why can't we have a system with the police, with the juvenile system, with all the systems that we're talking about right here? Instead of everybody doing their separate stuff, why don't we pull it all together? Why don't we integrate? Why don't we talk to each other? And that's the whole thing that we're not doing. And unless we get to the root of these problems, yes, I'm Indian too. I don't have a lot of gold, I'll be honest with you. And it doesn't matter to me. But the point is that here's the deal. It's not the Indian gold that's bringing in the people. It's something else. It's so many underlying factors.
Sure.
So I just want to make sure that people are seeing the third side.
Sure, and that's why we are here, because again, we don't have the public defender's office, so there's so much more to the system that we need to coordinate. So Ms. Ali, we are still discussing the system. So here is the police has brought in a person who's a juvenile to your court.
I just want to say, could I just make one comment?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sure that some of you all probably wondered why was somebody sitting on the panel talking about opioid addiction. And I'm sure somebody probably was wondering, what does that have to do with the burglary in my home? Because let me tell you this, I suspect that if that person was ever apprehended, there's a good chance that that person is addicted to drugs.
Dan, Howard, do you guys keep statistics on,
Yeah.
on what level of burglaries are addicts versus
Well, let me just tell you this. This is what is going on in our county right now. I believe in 2017, we had about 65 people who died of heroin overdoses in Fulton County. But this is the statistic that you don't hear, is that there's a drug called Narcan that could be applied to a person or given to a person to revive them from an overdose. Well, in 2016, Fulton County actually appropriated money to pass out to first responders, firemen, policemen, so that they could apply this drug. So in 2017, when they received the drug, in addition to the 65 people who overdosed, we had almost 400 people who were revived by this Narcan drug. So I want you to understand, so these people who are using the drugs, they have to get money to purchase the drugs. And the way that they normally do it is by breaking in somebody's car and breaking in somebody's house. Now, I want to just tell you one story about how I found out how tough this was. I went to a town hall meeting that was actually here in Milton, and some of the parents, I asked this question: how many of you guys have heard of a place in Atlanta called The Bluff? Have you guys heard of The Bluff? Well, I was shocked because everybody in the meeting had heard of this place in Atlanta, because that's the place that most of them buy heroin. So I asked some of the parents, well, how is it that you've heard of The Bluff? Some of the parents said, I am actually taking my child to The Bluff to buy drugs because that's the only way that I'm assured that my child is alive. You know, it's really got to be desperate when you're taking your child to purchase drugs. So I want you to understand that this is a really important part of our criminal justice process here in our county, is adequately dealing with this opioid crisis. Because one of our issues is there is not a treatment facility that people can receive treatment where you don't have to pay. And a lot of the people who are addicted don't have money to pay, so they don't receive any treatment, and they keep dying and they keep being addicted. And I'm glad you're here today so that you can explain to people that even though some people say, well, I don't know anybody who's died from opioid addiction, but how many people have been burglarized? Let me see your hands. Or had your car broken into? Would you raise your hands? Guys, it's the same problem. Could be part of the same problem. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you. So,
May I just do a follow-up to what Mr. Howard said?
yes, Ms. Ali, you can use this
Let
one.
me use this one.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I was very happy coming here today is that I hope this is the beginning of a conversation where we start providing resources to those who need it the most. Mr. Howard, I know you will agree with me. Drug is the underlying reason for most of the crimes that we have dealt with. I have been a public defender for 17 years, and I have tried a lot of cases, and it's usually starting from some kind of drug issue or the other. The best of our children in our homes, in our nice neighborhoods, have drug issues. It's not just the case from the other side of town. What I want to bring up, Mr. Howard, is that when we came up with the opiates issue and we decided that it is a health issue, it was probably the best day for me. But what I also want us to realize is that before the opiates issue came up, there was crack. And we're not paying any attention to that. And so with that said, having said that, I just want us to realize that there's a deeper issue in the community, and it doesn't matter where community you are. There is a big issue dealing with drug use of children, and it's the children of everyone, that when we leave here today, that we all decide how we are going to advance the issue of providing socially responsive resources. And I think you said it best. What is cultural competence? With the way we provide resources here on this side of town is not what we're going to provide on the other side of town. But the question is, how do we determine what's best?
Yes,
I can
so
answer
Ms.
your question.
Ali, the question, yes, I'm glad you had something to say about that, but suppose the person is brought to your juvenile justice court, right?
Yes.
Would he get a sentence? Would he be incarcerated? Or can you tell quickly about there is an alternative to being incarcerated, and what is that?
Yeah, we have a lot of alternatives to detention. We have decided that detaining the children is actually not working. They're learning to be better criminals, right? So you send them for 6 months to a year or whatever. They come back and they have learned better traits. What we're hoping to be in our court is to be a court where we just say punishment is not the first thing that you do. We provide resources to the children. If children are going to school, they are very, very unlikely to break into homes. If they have parents in their homes, they're very unlikely to break into homes. Our goal in our juvenile court, I know for our juvenile court in Fulton County, is if a child comes in and is deemed to have done something wrong, we look at the level of that offense that the child has committed. Is it the first time? Is it the second time? Is there a parent who can take the child? We have grandparents raising grandchildren because sometimes the parents are not in the home. So we have a 3-generation level that we apply to the children. Can we send the children back home with services, or is the child that we need to put in a group home? So there are many factors that go into whether a child is going to be detained, whether a child is going to be punished. But our hope is that every child that comes to us is going to get one level of service or the other. Because most of our children have been disengaged from the traditional educational system, we have decided in our court to start a regular school. So now we have 2 classrooms with certified teachers. In 2016 and 2017, we have 17 GEDs, kids who have gotten their GED, and our first baby went to Georgia State January of this year. So we have a lot of services. I put a lot of books in the back of the hall for services that we provide in juvenile court. So to answer your question directly, it depends on what it is that the child has done. Is this the first time? Is this the second time? How much can we talk to the district attorney's office? Because they have to prosecute the cases. They have to keep the community safe. And our goal is the same. How can we keep the community safe? By making sure that we have community solutions, which is what I've heard all about. We take care of our children. We have to make sure that the kids who do not have any parents to take care of them, that we in juvenile court, we put ourselves in place of parents, and we can provide them with education, we can provide them with health resources, so we can close the educational gaps, we can close the health gaps.
Great. So Judge Lal, finally the system is sort of coming to the court. The criminal is brought forth. What are your decisions? So you put them on probation or incarcerate. Have there been cases where you made decisions and let go, and they come back into the community and continue what they've done before? How does that? Do you count all of those while making decisions? That's my question.
Well, first of all, as a magistrate judge, I don't prosecute I don't preside over a felony case, but sitting as a Superior Court judge by designation, a defendant, if he is found guilty of a burglary offense beyond a reasonable doubt, then he would be sentenced to several years, depending on what the pre-sentencing report is. Generally, individuals who have no prior criminal background, no prior convictions, they would be given some time in a prison facility of maybe up to a year or 2 years, and then be on probation. While on probation, if they commit another crime again, then more likely than not, their probation is revoked, and they would end up spending the rest of their prison sentence in a jail facility. There are times when we have what we call probation revocation hearings, and those are situations where the judge would listen to the reasons why an individual had violated their probation. Typically, if it's because of committing another crime, especially another felony, and especially another similar offense, then more often than not, the judge hearing the probation revocation hearing for an adult would be to revoke their probation and have them serve the rest of their time in a prison facility.
Sure, thank you. So I have one question for Deputy Sheriff Hashim, and if suppose a resident is so unsatisfied with your services and they keep bugging that you have not solved their problem, you have not caught the criminal, how do you respond? And then I want closing comments, few seconds from each of you. Go ahead.
Well, are you talking about as a deputy or as a department?
As a department. Because
Well,
the person who has contacted knows only you. They don't know the department.
Well, what happens is, as I said, once we do the report and it goes to the investigator, they're the ones who's handling the case at that time. When they're handling the case, it may take investigation some time. It could take them a day, 2 days, a week, 2 weeks, a month, a year, whatever time it takes for them to be satisfied that, okay, this is our suspect, this is our offender, and we need to take warrants and arrest them. It takes time. And I've seen cases that it's taken some time, but there have been arrests made on it. So it may take some time. It's not that the investigators are not doing what they're supposed to, but they have a tremendous amount of workload that they have to go through as well. They have cases after cases after cases. So it depends on where they stand at that point.
Nandita, do you have anything to respond to?
I have a lot to say, so I'll let the mic go this way when it gets to my turn.
Why don't you just say a few things? I know how many months has it been since the theft has occurred in your burglary?
The theft happened at our house in March. We have still not recovered. What I'm hearing from all of you, and please understand this, I am speaking from this being understanding of all the work that is happening. But what I'm seeing is a lot of work represented here is happening in favor of, or what's happening to the criminal, or why is he doing this, or telling me about all this other stuff after it has happened to me. I have questions for all of you guys. At what point are you going to find a way to help the victim? At what point is the criminal getting caught? At what point do we have answers? This is for all the stuff that we generalize. I can probably be the odd one out with the only Indian in our neighborhood, and everything else that you tell me about what they're looking for and how we are making a lot of assumptions about who breaks into the house. These are very, very sophisticated people. Article from LA Times from about 3 or 4 years ago. Every year in LA, targeted burglaries have netted the criminals about $2 million and up every single year. This is from a few years ago. These are not kids off the street. They are really, really thinking about what they're doing to you. So think about this. If you are going to work and you put your game plan in place about what clothes you're going to wear, this is what they're doing to you. This is not that fix that they're trying to fix. There is a mechanism and process. Where does all this stuff go? Who is melting all that gold? Where is it money going? They can't eat that. They can't chew on the gold. They can't take it to the grocery store and buy groceries off of it. It has to be processed. Where is the pipeline for this? And why is the pipeline not getting stemmed? We can fight over who gets what resources, but when you're the victim and you're looking at all your hard-earned money going to feed somebody else's lifestyle, you have to ask the question. Every person who has been burgled, whatever's taken from their house is not just money. It's peace of mind, it's sense of security, it is mental trauma. And that is never addressed. It's never talked about. Not in law enforcement because they are dealing with other things, rightfully so. But for the victim, the resolution never comes. And I don't know when you say they are thinking about this just as their immediate fix and they are hired guns for somebody else. Well, in that case, this is a big crime syndicate somewhere. This is organized. These kids, or whoever it is, and I'm assuming that because everybody's assuming it's kids, whoever is breaking into a house, taking gold jewelry, taking cash, taking watches, they are getting pawned somewhere, they are getting melted somewhere. Where is that next stop for them? That's what we need to find. Not about what happens to their life after and how they get rehabilitated. All that is great. Please do it. That is necessary so that they don't harm somebody else again. But how do we stop it? Please answer that. That would be great. I would appreciate your input. Yes.
Thank you, DA.
All right. Well, so this is my point. Whatever we do, it has to be comprehensive. It has to be comprehensive because the more that we can do, the more likely it is that what happened to you won't happen again. And you got to be comprehensive because if you just look at it from the suppression part, from the police, you miss a piece that you could deal with prevention. And so you just it's gotta be comprehensive. But you brought up a good point, and I hope you all will write this down. Just remember this term, because what she is talking about is, so if you break in my house and you steal gold and television sets, so what do you do with it? 42% of these defendants will take them to pawn shops and secondhand shops. And the gold that they steal is melted down within a couple of days and it's sold. And that goes on here in our county and all over our state. So this is what in the DA's office we've been proposing. There is an internet program called Leads Online. It's called Leads Online. And every police department and municipality ought to have it, because what it does is when a pawn shop transaction takes place, it immediately reports it to the police. The reason that's important is because a lot of the people who are selling the stuff at pawn shops are called regulars. They are forever pawning stuff at pawn shops because they are thieves. That's what they do. It is important that if the Milton Police Department is using Leads Online, then you've got to also use it in the city of Atlanta. Because if you're a crook, if you know that they're using it in Milton, then what you simply do is you go to the city of Atlanta. We're not using it in the city of Atlanta. We should use it all over our county. In Tucson, Arizona, they instituted the system, and just within a year, they were able to reduce burglaries by 18%. They reduced property crimes by 43%. In Dallas, Texas, they use this same system, and they have been able over the last 5 years to reduce property crimes by about 53%. So if you ask me, what we have to do is we've got to take advantage of the technology that's available. We've got to police the pawn shops, the gold shops where you can sell gold, the shops where you can take copper and sell, the game shops where you can take video games and sell them. And what should happen is when you're selling them, you should be required to show your ID. You should be required to give a fingerprint so that the police can cover and monitor that transaction immediately. We have got to have it in Fulton County. We ought to have it in the region, and we ought to have it in the whole state. And again, my name is Paul Howard, and I said it, it's called Leads Online. And we need to demand that that technology is connected within our communities. And the reason that's so important is if you are burglarized the first time, the crooks are very likely to come back a second time. And that's why it's important to detect those transactions when they occur the first time. You know, I mentioned to you about the woman in South Fulton who died in the closet. 4 guys burglarized her home. After the case was over with, the DA's office found out that these same guys had already gone to pawn shops 33 times. So by my notion, if we had Leads Online, those guys would have already been apprehended. We need it in our communities.
Definitely. And is that something you need advocacy from community members
Yes.
to get funding for?
Yes, we do. We need the homeowners associations, and I don't want to be rude because I was asked a question about how do we know that people that commit crimes are using drugs, and I didn't answer the question, and I apologize. One of the reasons that we know, and I don't know if you might be aware of this, at our Fulton County Jail, when people are booked into the jail, they are administered a test to determine whether or not drugs are in their systems at the time that they are arrested. And I believe the number is around 67% of the people who get arrested, there are drugs, some heroin, cocaine, or marijuana in their systems at the time that they are brought to the Fulton County Jail. And I just wanted to say, I wasn't ignoring your question, but
Sure.
That's how we know that they are.
And the criminal history background, drug conviction.
That's correct. Yeah.
Sure. So Trey, you should definitely connect with the DA because you have the JCAA, the Johns Creek Community Association, JCCA, which represents like what, 70 HOAs. So maybe that's something you want to start with and write a letter to the legislation about more funding for the Leads Online.
Yeah, it's certainly an avenue to get the word out. That's actually the first that I've ever heard of it, and those statistics are pretty staggering. The reductions and some of these numbers that you're bringing up. It's very interesting. First I've ever heard of it though, and I imagine it's probably the first everybody in here has ever heard of it.
Sure. So I know we are short on time, but believe me, after the break, we are coming back so the audience gets an opportunity to ask questions of all of you. But I do want at least 20 seconds closing comments or your final thoughts for today to leave with, and we will bring the fine gentleman right during the Q&A.
Well, I truly believe that we're all interconnected, and that we should want for our neighbors what we want for ourselves. And with that mindset, I believe that the well-being of all of our communities will be enhanced. That's a principle that I seek to live by. And for you, my sister, the Office of Victim Assistance, there is an Office of Victim Assistance. Whether they do what they say, what they're named to do, I don't know. But I was just talking with my wife the other day, just yesterday actually, and I said, we've come to a place where we're taking care of the criminals. We've come to a place where we're taking care of the perpetrators of crime, but what about the victims? And there is an Office of Victim Assistance. How used it is, whether you've tried to access their service or not, I don't know. But there is an office that exists, and if we hold them accountable, we can get some resolve to some of our issues. And I'd just like to say that to you.
Thank you. Trey?
Yes, I just want to say thank you to Nazira for putting this together. I've learned an awful lot tonight that I didn't know, and bringing a lot of very experienced minds together. And also, I hear the incredible frustration in your story, in your voice, in the frustration of the community over this issue. And it's something we definitely need to have more. The time flew by here, and I think more meeting in the minds like this and bringing out some of the conversations and concerns, your rebuttals to some of these actually brought out things that and ideas and made me think about things that I hadn't thought before. And I do believe that a lot of this starts at a very young age. I appreciate the work that you're doing. I feel like so many of these things, if you're able to stop them with youth before it ever becomes an issue, keeping them, it's all, you know, not all of it, but the multifaceted approach is very important. But stemming it before it actually becomes a problem, before somebody turns to drugs or before somebody is given that opportunity and then they're hooked, teaching them about ethics or having them learn about things, especially in absent father homes, those are all so important. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and everything I've learned tonight. Thank you so much.
So how would you like the community to be a part of JCCA? Is it open to all residents? Is it a membership?
It's a HOA member organization. So if your neighborhood, you can go to jccahome.org. If your neighborhood HOA is not a member, you can find that on there. We have a list of the HOA member neighborhoods, and if they're not, you can go to your HOA board and ask that they join. And we have community safety days. We have we disseminate information to the community about different things that are going on. Seminars and things of this nature, also zoning cases, things that don't have to do with crime, but it's a good opportunity for communication between neighborhoods and between residents, which is, I think, probably the most important thing here, coming up with these ideas and communicating with one another.
Great, thank you. Nandita?
I'll wait for Q&A.
Okay, I understand.
Well, thank you, Ms. Nazira, for putting all this together. It was great. It's really great to meet with all the beautiful minds here. And first of all, I would like to join every one of the panelists here and to acknowledge your frustration that you are going through. And as a law enforcement, I do believe that law enforcement agencies do seek the help of the community. The community is our third eye. We really need help, and whether it would be crime-solving situations, we'll be calling out suspicious people. Most of the time, when you call suspicious people, that would deter them doing something that they were there to do. It deters them away. So please do not take this as, oh, if I call them, I'm going to be in trouble. That's not the case. And please do call us. Please do call 911 whenever we need to. We'll be there as we can.
This is an out of context question, but I'm still going to ask it because it's me. Do you think we all should own a gun at home?
I mean, it's your discretion, but I have it. My sister knows how to use a gun. My father knows how to use a gun.
I was planning to
And-
go on a class. That's why I'm asking you.
Yes, you guys can, and you guys can either have them in the vehicle as well. It is considered as extension of your home. You can put them in the glove box, but if you get pulled over, please let the officer know that you have a gun in there. And yes, you do. Yes, you do. You can own a gun, but you have to go through some background checks and stuff like that. But yes, you should.
Okay, thank you. DA?
Well, despite the fact that only one person knew who I was, I am just
They were just kidding.
I'm just so happy to be here today. I don't know if you've heard people make this comment. I keep hearing this all the time, that we are a divided nation. Have you heard people say that? Let me tell you something. As long as we are divided, guess who profits the most by it? It's criminals when we are divided. And so I'm hoping that today, through this conversation, that we can move closer together. I do want to point out that in my office, we've actually got a prosecutor assigned to North Fulton. That's all she does. Her name is Bailey Rogers, and she is our North Fulton County community prosecutor. And I hope that you guys would take advantage of Bailey to call her, because that's what she does. She works with communities and she works with crime issues. So I hope you get a chance to meet Bailey, and I hope that she'll be working with you as we move forward. But I am just delighted to be here today.
Thank you so much, Judge.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to again apologize. I'm a very poor substitute for our Chief Superior Court
you're
Judge
fine.
McBurney. But thank you again. And I think, I hope we address some of the issues, especially in the Johns Creek, North Fulton area with regards to property crimes. A lot of it is a proactive approach. You have to also understand some of the things your parents may have said to you. Look around your surroundings, you exercise common sense, and all we are really trying to do is hopefully reduce the likelihood of us being a victim of burglary crime. For those who are victims, I mean, our hearts go out to you, and we try our very best within our parameters to try to reach a resolution. But as you've heard from all these individuals on the panel, it is a gargantuan problem, and we can only try to chip away at the issue to finally reach some kind of utopian resolution.
Thank you.
Please let me just say this to you, that your house does not have to be broken in to feel what you feel right now. It is an invasion of a very significant proportions. You come into your home, somebody's already been there, you feel like you're being followed every time you come into the house. And we hear you in our court every day, through the children, through the victims who come in. It is a very serious issue. And so I hope nothing that's been said in here today, that you take it as we are not listening to you. I live on the other side of town from here, and I feel my house is just like a Fort Knox, because we lock everything down. It is something that we all feel, and my heart really goes out to you. From our court, we hope we are doing everything to make the children accountable, and that we can meet them where they are, so that they cannot be the ones out there causing you this much pain, because it's almost like I can reach your pain from where I sit. And I don't know what to say. Sorry.
Thank you. Jason?
I just want to say thanks to everybody for coming out tonight. And, if you have any questions directly for me, you get my card. You can call me, text me, whatever you would like, whether it's, you may have questions about your current security system that may be serviced through someone else, but I'm happy to share my knowledge with anybody that has questions about it, and how, I think you can tactically at least make the wall a little bigger than it already is at your home if you have a security system or have any questions around that. And I feel very privileged that Nazira asked me to come up here tonight, and even more so now that I kind of got to witness the level of just the polarizing people that I got to sit next to tonight and hear all of your stories and your triumphs and things like that. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Tracy?
Okay, I think the bottom line that I would say we want to walk away with, in my perspective, is communication is key. We need to break down barriers. We need to communicate. We need to break down silos. Training, we need to train our trainers. We need to train our educators. Because right now, I think that's where we're shy of, is getting that message to the end user, for lack of better words. My focus is on health behavior, health promotion, and I think if we can all continue to engage in these types of dialogues that Nazira has put together, this platform that she's created, which is encouraging courageous conversations and really trying to get all stakeholders involved, you know, at all levels. So I thank you, Nazira, for adding me to the group. I also feel very, very privileged. And again, my goal is to see if we can just create a level playing field, breaking down ethnic and racial health disparities, and looking at all of us as one. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So we're gonna go on a break for like 5 to 8 minutes, or like let's get back at 6:15 so our panelists can answer questions for you. Since we started 10 minutes late, would it be okay if the panelists stay till 6:40 or 6:45? Right? Okay. Sounds good. And before we leave, if I can have Masood from New York Life Insurance to come and hand the gifts. He actually helped sponsor this program for this evening. So thank you, Masood, from New York Life Insurance. If you can come forward. Trey. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes, if you can hand this to them. Yeah, gifts to them. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, no problem. Trey, oh yeah, if you can look that side and hand it to them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in over here and honoring us. Yes.
Thank you, Jason. I'm so sorry it got late. It's just so much to discuss. Yes. Just Judge.
I wanted a car.
Okay, we're gathering back for the Q&A session. Just to make sure more people have an opportunity to ask questions, I would like some help either from Rajan or Masood to just hand the mics to those who have questions, please. Thank you. Okay, so if we can have the audience back, and if you can raise your hands who has questions, and I'll try to moderate it to the best so all the questions are covered this evening. Mr. Salil, go ahead. And make the questions short.
Sure.
And hopefully the panelists will be able to answer briefly as well.
First of all, thank you, everybody. You have done an excellent job. Just a very quick note. Last Friday, not my house, but the house next to my house got burgled. And we have been having meetings. We have been discussing amongst the community members, the HOAs. Now, one of the, the topic of today's discussion also included combating the burglaries and the crimes, right? But I did not hear anything about it. So I would like to encourage all of you to give us some tips to the community about what needs to be done in order to prevent these things from happening. We cannot prevent 100%, but at least some tips will kind of help everybody over here. So with that, I would like to ask the question.
I just think I mentioned that I
You did.
invited Johns Creek police officers to come and observe my property and gave me tips on how I could reduce the likelihood of being a burglary victim. And some of the tips were very enlightening, stuff that I didn't even think about that really helped in terms of trying to prevent being a victim.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I think Ms. Ali had to respond, and then DA. Please do use your mic because it gets transmitted to the audio system. Go ahead.
Now, what happened to you? I don't know that you could have prevented that. I don't. But sometimes it's a lot of things that we can do on our own personal basis to make sure that we are not targeted. If we have a business, which some of us have, we have to look for a different way of storing the money. And it's not just the Indian community that's where it happens. It's a lot of communities where we have businesses. So I hope in the future we all can get together and come up with tips, and maybe Nazira will help us to put it out to the different communities.
Great, thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think that there are a number of things that I would recommend that people ought to do. One of the first things that I would do is to organize my neighbors. I would get an association, because what you need is the other people in the neighborhood to help you watch your property. I would call the policemen in, and I would ask them to perform a security evaluation of every home in the neighborhood. And they might also give you some tips about the neighborhood as a whole, like maybe putting a gate or putting certain kinds of lighting at your neighborhood. So I would do that. Now, I'm not a salesman for this equipment, but I think it's always a good idea that you should have a home security system with adequate lighting and adequate surveillance, because at least if it doesn't keep somebody from coming in the first time, once they find out that you've got a system, they're much less likely to come in a second time. So to me, it's very important for that surveillance system. There are also some other little things that you can do that become very important, like marking your valuables. I mean, that's really important to mark them. And you know, the Leads Online system that I mentioned, there's a process that you can actually submit your numbers to the Leads Online database, and as a defendant is standing up selling your items, it will search that database and automatically alert the police. So it's a very good idea to mark your property. Every time you mark the property, you'll know that's a piece of property that thieves do not want to bother with if it's marked. All right?
Serial numbers for the Xbox systems. And
Right.
TVs.
Yeah. Yeah, but you can still, she mentioned marking jewelry, you can still mark the jewelry, and this is why it's important, because sometimes, you know, you have to give a description of an item. If it's got some particular marking on it, a number or letters or something of that sort, then it's easier to identify than just to say it's a gold ring or something of that sort. So
Can I ask a question
Yes.
right here? I had actually done a partial inventory of some of the things before they were stolen.
Right.
I had pictures with the weight. They were not able to find anything.
They were not able to find the pictures?
No, they were not able to place those into any form of database
Right,
for any pawning.
right.
So what's going on there? I mean, we can talk about, here's a bill for whatever,
Right.
and all that. And I even have pictures of, all right, this is the actual item that was
Right.
stolen.
And so that's why I think it's important for each community to create a system that you can submit your own marked property. And you can do that with Leads Online. You can actually submit your property, your identification numbers, without the police even being involved, such that if your property is sold at a pawn shop, secondhand shop, gold shop, the database will automatically hit upon your identification number. That's why it's so important, those ID numbers. In fact, I think the fire departments, you know, the firemen that are like sitting down at the fire department, I think that's one of the things that they ought to be doing. They ought to go to neighborhoods, and they should be marking people's property for them, because every time you do it, it's like gold, because it prevents somebody from wanting your property if it's got some kind of serial number on the property. Now, it's not going to solve every crime, but let me tell you, it is really important to get it marked.
Great. Trey, you have a question, and then
Yeah, there were several different, several things. I want to first echo what the judge said, that our neighborhood I also did something similar at my home, but also our neighborhood at our HOA meeting, we actually had one of the officers come out from Johns Creek PD, and they gave a talk to everybody that attended. Unfortunately, HOA meetings, even in a large neighborhood, are not as well attended as we'd like, but he gave an outline of what things that we could personally do individually and as a group to help combat burglary. So that's one thing that we did. The other thing I also would stress that what the deputy said and what I said in my first comments, if there is something that's relatively suspicious, and this obviously you know didn't apply in your situation because nobody made the call, but if there is that type of situation where you're not sure, go ahead and make that call. One of the things is, if your neighborhood has the reputation for having patrols, for having officers come through, the reputation for you're the neighborhood that calls the cops, that actually makes its way out to people. And I'll tell you how I know that. We had a problem in our neighborhood, and our solution is not necessarily one that would work for everybody because it involved a financial component. We had a really serious problem for several years at our, we're a swim tennis community, and we have a community pavilion. And we had a serious problem where we had teens during the summer months that would come in, and they would, we didn't have so much burglary, but they would damage property and go in and vandalize and things of that nature. Eventually, our solution, we had to have a police officer that was there every night, an off-duty officer that would come in, and so that's not necessarily a solution for everybody, but what it did do was it creates the reputation among the community, among those teens, people who had that proclivity toward coming in and vandalizing or burglary, that Hillbrook's a place, oh, there's a cop in there, you know, you don't want to go to that place. Or they have a lot of patrols, and I would imagine that that would be somewhat of a deterrent to criminals if they're going through the neighborhood and they see officers pretty often. You know, they don't want to encounter that, so they're going to go to the place that has easier pickings.
Sure. Has anyone from the audience taken a course or a certification program from your local police department? I've completed my Johns Creek Community Police Academy auxiliary services, so I get to go on rides along with the police or do vacation checks. I can ride a police car along with another person. Has anyone taken that? That just shows how you can be interested in sort of community policing, because they don't have enough. We have to step in to assist. Is anybody thinking of doing it? Definitely try it out.
I'm definitely thinking of doing that in Gwinnett County. And I do understand, Mr. Howard, that there were more African American who were burglarized. But I would request you to look into the details of how many Indian homes or Indian people were burglarized in either Gwinnett County or Fulton County. Second question is, you said that lease online. You said that we should get it, but do Fulton County has it online?
Some of the jurisdictions in Fulton County use Leads Online right now. But the point that I'm making is all of them should use it.
Exactly.
If all of them don't use it, then that means the crooks would simply go to the jurisdictions where they're not using it. And so I think that it should be not only our county, but we should do it as a region as well.
But is it possible for you to take this initiative and start with your county all over Fulton County?
Yes, and we're trying to do it right now, but guess who we need? We need you. We need you.
I'm there.
All right.
Yeah, how would they contact the county commission?
Contact the county commissioners, contact the police chiefs, and to contact your legislators. Hey, let me mention one other thing about the targeting. I've talked to so many people tonight, who believe that there might be some targeting. So this is what I am going to do, and I'll report back to you, because I'm going to talk with the policemen to find out if there is such an organized group that is targeting Indian citizens or some other citizens, because I want to find out if that's going on, well, why can't we stop it? Because if there isn't evidence of some organized group, I really think it's a bad idea to tell people that, to try to give them the impression that, well, maybe nothing could be done about it because the group is so sophisticated that the police can't catch them. But I will make the commitment to you today
Thank you.
that I am going to find out much more about it and report back to you all.
Thank you, sir. You can Google it and find out how many Indians were robbed while they were coming from the store to their home. Plus, a lot of people, they go to church, mandir or a masjid, and they are being followed. And then next time when they go back to church or mandir or mosque, they come and rob.
Okay.
Those things are happening.
All right. Well, my commitment is I'm going to find out about it. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
One other thing I forgot to mention, I believe most police departments have a vacation watch. You can contact the police department. A lot of them, they have it online, and there's a lot of common sense stuff when you're going to be gone that people talk about particularly. So I'm also a small business owner, and have to deal with a lot of cash, so I can empathize with those kind of feelings. Some of the things that have been recommended to me in years past were vary your routine a little bit. Don't always go to the exact same church service time if that's an option for you. Don't always make your bank deposit at exactly the same time. Don't take your money. Vary those types of things. These are sort of maybe not such common sense measures for folks, and a lot of you probably already do a lot of this stuff, but the vacation watch is something that I take advantage of whenever we're gone, and we don't tell people, and we do everything we can to try to make it seem like if we are gone, my family, it tries to make it seem like we're at home and have people come and check on our home and that type of thing.
I'll add something to this, and this is a thing that I forgot oddly to share. When we had left for out of town that weekend before the burglary happened, we had a very, 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 very chatty and very curious Uber driver who insisted on asking me, "Where are you going? How long are you gone? Oh, your bags are really heavy. Oh, are you going by this airline? Oh, you must be really rich. Are you really from India? How long have you stayed in this country?" This did not stop for about 3 miles until I had to yell at him and say, "Please focus on driving. We're going to be late." I reported him to the police. I reported him to Uber. Uber refunded us our fare and told us nothing more. So, if you are going out of town, if you are either an Uber driver, please don't ask these questions, especially if I'm in the back seat, because I'm going to yell at you. But if you are getting asked too many questions, please be careful about what information you give that guy. You don't know what he's blabbing about. He may have done nothing. He may have innocently mentioned it to somebody else, but we don't know where it went. And that was the creepiest, most unusual Uber ride I've ever had in my life. So please, if you're doing that, keep that in mind.
Thank you, Nandita, for bringing it up. Sheriff, do you have anything else? Deputy Sheriff, do you have anything else to add? Tackle crime.
Well, I would say that as Ms. Nandita, Ms. Nandita said that do not volunteer information, do not volunteer unnecessary information to anyone you don't know, including you may know someone you're friends with, someone you know, but you don't know them that well. Do not volunteer the information you don't want them to know about, and because that will protect you. And I know all of us have social media nowadays, and even on Facebook, when we go to a restaurant, oh, I'm with my family at such and such restaurant, guess what thieves are doing? They're monitoring your Facebook. You are there, you cannot be home. They go and burglarize your home while you're eating there. And when you come home, find your home being burglarized. So that's unnecessary information from my part, but please do be careful of that. And you know your normal routes when you go home, whether it be from work, grocery shopping, playing sports, whatever it may be. Take different routes every time, because at that point, if somebody's following you, you will know that this car was behind me the other day when I came from that road. Now it's behind me when I came from this road. Somebody's really following me. I need to report them. So you do need to take those kind of precautions.
Great. How many of you have heard about crimereports.com? Have you checked that site out? So this morning I did, and I just put a random address. I didn't put mine, but just a random address near the street. And I learned that there were 17 incidents in the past 6 months near my house. Wouldn't that be important? That would be very vital information for you. I was able to say which was a larceny, which was a burglary, which was a robbery, and which home was burglarized, and which police department took care of it or is still following. So crimereports.com, definitely check it out. That was really, I learned something today.
May I just, yes. Burglary generally can imply the concept of a property crime. Somebody broke into your dwelling and stole a TV or so forth. The definition of a burglary is also someone broke into a dwelling and committed a felony therein. So we have cases in which you could have a couple who are estranged and in like middle of a divorce, and one partner may have broken into the house or entered the house and may have assaulted the other partner, and can also be charged with burglary. So do keep that in mind. So you may have had multiple incidences of burglary in your neighborhood. It may not necessarily involve a property crime.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Bakshi?
My name is Ramesh Bakshi. I'm really surprised to hear from the panelists that you don't think a particular community has been targeted. And I heard from most of you that that's not the case, and we were justifying why somebody commits a crime. And I totally take exception to that whole thing. I have had many friends, which mostly Indian friends, in the North Fulton community with several subdivisions, and if you study the crime statistics in those subdivisions, if there are 10 crimes have been committed, the chances are more than half of them are within the Indian community or the South Asian community. That definitely states that it is not something that is randomly happening. Okay, they're picking up any house to go ahead and collect some money. It is being focused within the Indian community or the South Asian community, and that's where they are being robbed. And these people are not off the street people who are coming to pick your pocket and going to steal something. These people are organized crime people. These people are so sophisticated that my next door neighbor's house, when it was robbed, they came, they cut their telephone line so that the security system is not called, and they spent inside more than half an hour, picked up all the jewelry and whatever they needed to pick up, and walked away. Okay? So this is not something off the street that a person is coming to look for drugs. These people are sophisticated enough to know that you have money, you are good to do, well-to-do person, and they are being focused. So let us not forget that point. Let us not, wash it out and say that, well, when you look at the total crime statistics, adding the Atlanta, South Fulton, and all that areas into it, we may become 0.01% or something. But you go into these North Fulton communities and look at this crime statistics, then you will find out a completely different story. That's number one point. So I want all of you to be sensitized to the point that there are groups which are targeting an Indian community or a South Asian community in the North Fulton, Gwinnett, East Cobb, well-to-do subdivisions, number one. Second thing, the sensitiveness of the police department. I have the first-hand experience where our subdivision, we had a HOA meeting. We had invited Johns Creek Police Department, the detectives, a couple of them came. This is about 4 to 5 years ago when a lot of these things were happening in the North Fulton, North Atlanta area. They came to speak to us. And when we raised the question, hey, it is happening like this, and the detective had the courage or whatever you want to say it, he went ahead and said, well, that's happening only to a small community of people, okay, a small group, so none of you have to worry about it. The entire group, I was the only Indian down there, okay, others didn't come, but everybody else was the local white people, okay, and they said, you don't have to worry about it, it's happening only to a small group. They discounted the entire idea that a particular group has been targeted. And that's the most unfortunate thing to hear when a police person or a detective person identifies and says, and discounts the whole thing. That means to them it is not an important item because it's not happening to the general community. And that's the saddest part that I have heard. And I want to know what actions have been taken or have been taken to combat that kind of a situation within the police department.
Mr. Bakshi, that was one of the reasons the panelists were gathered, and now the district attorney's office, who is also mainly responsible for tackling or solving some of these crimes, has made a commitment that...
I got it. In fact, I'm sitting up here now thinking about the members of my Indian task force that we're going to look at this. So my commitment is I'm going to find out and I'm going to report to you because I'm here to listen and I've heard you loud and clear. All right?
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, Mr. Mr. Raghu, you, and then I don't know your name, sorry.
Thank you, Nazira, for conducting these kinds of events. I'm a victim of two burglaries. One is my car was broken into, some valuables were taken. And the second one was in the middle of the night when I was living in the Atlanta like 10 years ago. A person came, knocked my door, and then we called the police. The police did not come on time. We were thinking the police are going to show up. And then after an hour, we called the police again, and then they said they couldn't able to enter the apartment because they don't have the key fob or something to get into the apartment. So the one question to the police officer is whether all the police officers have access to these gated communities or these apartments to get in through if there is an emergency. That is one. The second thing is after this happened, I went and spoke to my neighbors that this thing happened last night, and one of my friend who I was in the second level and he was in the first level, he said the gun question was mine, but you asked him earlier, do you have a gun? I said no. So I was thinking he's one unique person who asked me this question. So I went and asked the other neighbors around, and everyone said you should own a gun. In the Indian community, many people do not own the gun, or they are still working on their green cards and citizenships. So if whether that person who is not a citizen of this country yet, but they are working on their citizenship, whether they have the rights to own a gun. If so, what are the implications of that?
Sure.
Thank you for the question, sir. The answer to your first question about the gated community, I do not know how your local agency works with that, but what we do is if there is a gated community like an apartment complex or even a house that has a gate on it, we have a specialized code that they give it to us. So we do have codes to enter a subdivision or a apartment complex at that time. And answer to your second question about people with the green card owning a weapon, I'm not particularly sure about that. So if I answer that, I would be lying to you. I don't want to do that. So I'll be honest and I'll say you can refer that to a magistrate.
She knows the answer.
As long as you're 18, over the age of 18, and you don't have a criminal history, you can apply for a firearm license through your probate court clerk's office. And you would have to check with them with regards to what are the requirements, including a fee. There is a waiting period, and then if it all checks out, you should be licensed to carry a firearm. Now, what are the implications of that with regards to your immigration status? That was something you'd have to consult your immigration attorney.
Great. The other person had a question.
Hello. My name is Gopi Koganti. I live in Alpharetta, and burglary happened in my subdivision too. And Thank you, Nazira, first of all, for organizing this, and thank you all the panelists for coming here, taking your time and explaining us. But what I came here to learn about is totally different to what we went through. I mean, I learned so many other things which are very important to know. But at the same time, I'm quite surprised that with all the technology and data that we have, everybody on this side of the floor believes it is a targeted attack. But most of the panelists don't agree with that. I'm quite surprised with that. And again, this is a question to law enforcement. Thank you, sir, for everything that you do and to keep us safe. But whenever we report an incident, let's say my security system shows up something, and if it says somebody intruded in my house, how do you guys approach it in general? Do you send just one person to go and check the problem, or do you see that as an opportunity to capture a crook and take him off the street and send 4 different cops to corner that place and try to capture them? How do you typically approach that? And oftentimes, even with all the security systems that we have believed that by the time a law enforcement official shows up, they already done the work and they left. And it's very hard to catch them. So how do you guys, I mean, do you see that as an opportunity to catch the criminal?
So your question was, if somebody's inside your house and you call 911, and when responding, how do we respond? Was that the question? What happens, as I said, I'm not sure about the other agencies. I can't answer for them. But what we do, if there is a something like that, like a burglary in progress, we do come with licensed sirens, and we usually are multiple units that come in, try to get there as fast as possible, as soon as possible, and as safe as possible. And that's including stopping at stop signs, even our licensed sirens, stopping at red lights, even licensed sirens, and get there as safe as we can. And when we do that, we try to visualize what kind of property it is and what kind of residence it is, and approach it that way. And we have multiple units come in. One goes in the back, in the front, on the sides, whatever. We find the entrance ports at that time. We try to cover that, and we try to enter the residence. I'm not sure if you would be online with dispatcher at that time. Most of the time, they will tell you to hide or something in that nature. Maybe go to your closet and keep us online at that point. If you hear something, if you hear somebody close by, if you hear a knock on the door, if you hear somebody comes up the stairs, that you can relay that message to us. And yes, the answer to your question was that we do try to apprehend whoever the suspect is at that point.
Great. We'll take one more final question. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Meghna Naik. Social media and how much to share is my question. I had put that as one of the, did we already ask that? We were just talking about it earlier. Okay, I read your mind.
Oh, just among us.
Okay, so my question is how much to share, and is there that angle of it, of social media, is anybody using that as research? And I know some of the robbers or burglars don't do any research, and it's a question of, I need my fix now. I do agree with that. But are there people who are criminals who use social media? I guess it's my question. For example, my next door neighbor got broken into. Her daughter is 16 and a model for a jeweler called Milani Jewelers. It's the top jeweler of Atlanta for Indians. She used to post literally every necklace and every earring she modeled. And it was public. And she got broken into, and the robber didn't realize that if he was following her, that's my question. Was he like targeting this family? Because nobody else got touched. My question is, how much to share? And is that even something we need to consider, or am I just panicked over nothing? Maybe I am, so you have to tell me.
I really don't know the answer to that question because I don't know the mind of the burglar. Mr. Howard has made mention of burglary convicted felons who've been interviewed and why they go for a particular area. Yeah. I'll just let you know that our favorite type of criminal that comes into our court system is the most stupid criminal. the one who enters someone's property, drops his wallet, touches everything with his bare fingers, and unfortunately cuts his hand or something, leaves his blood there so that we can get the blood sample, do a DNA, and trace him, and wham bam, we've got them. Okay, that's our favorite criminal. Yes, your neighbor got burglarized, and the particular burglar, they did this, and they were very sophisticated. I don't know who these burglars are, but Officer Amdani and his colleagues and his brethren, you will not believe the amount of work that they have to do to develop a case to eventually bring someone to justice. It is such an enormous job. Even just initially trying to bring a case to a judge like me to even get a warrant for an arrest, it is an enormous job. It's a forensic search of evidence. It is to determine, going through phone records, getting search warrants, because the officers know and they are trained that they make one wrong step, that could jeopardize the entire investigation, and they lose the case because then the defendant would be scot-free because of infringing on their constitutional rights. So please do understand that there are burglars that do get away, there are burglars who do get caught. And like I mentioned, every week we see that. Social media, use your common sense. What we were discussing I have friends who like to go on social media with the limo in the background in front of their big house, and they're saying, we're off on a cruise for 2 weeks. And I'm like calling him up, you idiot. You know, what are you doing? Especially when you're a businessman and your social media, it's accessible to everyone, not just friends. So folks, use your common sense. It's just really what it boils down to.
And also, at the end of the day, nobody cares that you're going on a cruise.
Yes.
Nobody cares.
Well, what we say to people is you should not post something that you don't want everybody to know.
Right.
If there's somebody that you don't want to know about it,
just don't.
You shouldn't post it.
Right.
But let me ask you, I'm still trying to figure out, why do people post what they're eating? I'm still don't get that one, you know. But, oh, okay.
You have an excuse, yes. And, okay, yeah, let's finish it off. So she has her hands up, so go ahead. Can you speak on the mic, please? Yes.
I just had one question. We're talking about theft or a burglary that happens when somebody's not at home. What if I'm at home and then there's a burglary? What are the steps that I should be taking?
Get out.
If you're at home?
Yes.
Yes.
Then it happens.
So your question is the same question as the gentleman asked. If you're at home and the burglar is in progress, correct? Somebody breaks into your house, you hear him, you call 911. That's your question. Same answer. Stay online with dispatcher, 911, which is 911. Sorry, we call them dispatchers. 911, and they dispatch us to the call as a burglary in progress, and as whatever they get it as. And once again, I do not know about any other agencies, but this is how it happens in our agency. We respond to it as quickly we can, as safe as we can, to your house, and surround the house if we can, and see if there is any damage, like a window or door, any damage like that to enter the residence. If it is, we surround that, we go to the entrance, and at that point, you should be hiding somewhere still online with the dispatcher so you can tell us what do you hear, where do you hear them, what's going on with you, do you hear more than one people, is there only one person, stuff like that. And let's say, I'm sorry I couldn't answer the second question. His question was that what happens if we come there and the suspect leaves and we get there. At that point, we do the report, and since we don't know them, we can't identify them, it goes to our investigation unit.
What if we can't be audible with 911? Let's say I can't really be in a hiding place where I can still be heard if I'm talking to 911 and then I get found.
Just call 911 and just leave it as it is.
Okay.
And they can still hear you, even though if you call 911 and hang up, we're still gonna come to your house. That's how we work. We still come to your house and make sure that you're okay.
There's
And
no texting capability for 911, right?
I'm not sure about that.
Maybe that's the technology that we should, because if you can't be audible, like I should be able to text. I mean, understanding
Yes,
that it's
if you dial 911 and just keep your phone with you or drop it on the floor where we can still hear you, they'll still send us, just to make sure that you're okay. But we'll still be responding.
Thank
to
you.
Okay, great. Sure. So Salilji, we have to sort of end because the other party is here
Just
to have.
two pieces of advice, and pretty much everybody, they might know or they don't know, but if you're going to go leave your house for extended period of time, nobody's going to be there, call the police department, let them know the dates of your absence.
It's called
and
vacation
also
checks,
also the mail, US mail. That's all.
Okay. Okay, great.
I mean, like, we got a lot of precautions from this side, but my question to since we are talking about the system, if there is a highway or a local way where there is 35 speed and people are going 45, the cops are so interested to cop there and give tickets, right? Since we hear so many break-ins and all that, my question to the honorable judge is, sir, is there any case, I mean, I'm not sorry to refer she, I didn't get your name, but the police or the system takes so many precautions to bring somebody to a justice, right? Is there one case that police really stopped it, or there was a suspect that he was hiding in a particular place, and then the police really show that kind of interest and bring to your attention, and is there any case filed in your whole history?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Well, I guess your question was that why is law enforcement so interested on speeders and?
Not in that offending way, but see,
No.
I mean, I just want to be clear. It's not
What
that
happens? What happens is that
the attention,
What?
In Fulton County.
It's
No, is there any one case like, okay, police really caught
It's
them
act-
before he get in? My question.
It's actually a very good question, and I would like to answer that. What
Sure.
happens is, well, as once again, in our agency, I'm not sure about other agencies, we have specialized units that are dedicated just for traffic stops. So all they do is traffic stops. But there are other units, there are other deputies, police officers that are dedicated to answer 911 calls, like your burglaries, robberies, domestics, stabbings, shootings, everything. And by those, and most of us also do traffic stops, you wouldn't realize how many people we capture just by traffic stops. We have caught murderers, we have caught shooters, we have got robbers, we have got burglars, just by doing traffic stops. And those traffic stops are very effective near the neighborhoods, because if a suspect or offender who is wanting to harm someone, who is wanting to burglarize a residence in the neighborhood, will see the blue lights, and it will deter them away, because they know that there's a law enforcement presence by the subdivision, so they better not do anything.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. So let's give it up for the panelists for spending their evening here. Thank you so much, panelists.